Formula One on 5 Live.
Hello and welcome to Texas, where the roar of Formula One engines is about to echo across the Lone Star State. The iconic Circuit of the Americas hosts us for the 13th time just outside of Austin, a track that twists and turns through the rolling landscape, and the Texas sun is well and truly shining. The stars and stripes are flying as the teams prepare to roll out for free practice one. The one and only practice they will get, because it's a sprint weekend, and we'll head straight into sprint qualifying later this afternoon. But we've got plenty to discuss over the course of the next hour. It's Harry Benjamin with you up in the commentary box, keeping an eye on things for us. Down in pit lane, let's say good afternoon to Jenny Gow.
Good afternoon, Harry. Good afternoon, everyone. What a beautiful day it is here in Austin. Some white fluffy clouds, but almost no wind, and some blue sky above. And if I look to my left, Oscar Piastri is just getting a cooling fan given to him as he sits and gets seatbelted into his number 81 McLaren car. He's leading the championship, of course, but I think everyone has been talking about what happened in Singapore, and I'm talking about the collision on lap one, and what the possible side effects might be, what the repercussions are. And Harry, it's got everyone in the paddock talking, hasn't it?
It certainly has, Jen, and we are absolutely going to be discussing all of that and more across the next hour. Just a few minutes until the cars go out on track. Joining me to discuss everything and anything up in the commentary box is one of my favourite journalists. It's Scott Mitchell-Marm from the race, and we've also got BBC F1 correspondent Andrew Benson here too. Welcome both. How are we, Scott? Enjoying Austin once more?
Absolutely. This is one of the best events all season to come to. I think it's really established itself well on the calendar. Both circuit and events thrived, especially in the last few years. I think this has become one of the modern classics of Formula One, one of the newer circuits, but I think one of the favourites.
Yeah, we discussed this in our preview show, which is on the Checkered Flag feed on BBC Sounds as well, Andrew. Austin kind of is, pretty much for everybody, one of the favourites on the calendar. It's very much up your street, Andrew. You love it.
There's nothing not to like about Austin, Harry. It's a great city. There's live music on every street corner. There's a really nice vibe to it. We're a fair distance from the city here, about a 25-minute drive, depending on the traffic, which can be quite sticky. And as Scott said, this is one of the new Tilkedrome circuits designed by Hermann Tilke, or partially designed by Hermann Tilke in this case, a German architect who Bernie Ecclestone sort of made the F1 in-house architect, but he did a really good job of this one, where he's been criticised for some others. And it's got a bit of everything, and everybody really, really likes it here for all of those reasons.
Yeah, it's got that rise, huge incline and rise up to turn one, hasn't it? You go about 134 feet uphill towards turn one, and it plunges downhill, almost sort of a bit element of Suzuka-like with the S's, and then you're into a very much inspired by Maggots and Beckett's of Silverstone quick flicks between 3, 4, 5 and 6. You have that long back straight as well that takes you towards turn 12. 5.5 kilometres just over that. This circuit covers just over 3.4 miles, 20 turns, 11 going left, 9 going to the right. One of 3 tracks in the US, and certainly one that I think a lot of the drivers enjoy the challenge of, as they're just having their last couple of moments in the cockpit of their cars before we wait for the green light. Let's head back down to the pit lane with Jenny.
Yes, I'm still outside the McLaren garage, and actually the team principal, Andrea Stella, has just come in and fist pumped all the side of the garage. He started off with Lando Norris's side, actually, as he walked through that way. And just, I think it's quite a nice welcome when the team principal comes into the garage and just recognises all the guys who have built the car, who have built garage over the week ahead of the race. They've been out here since Sunday, Monday, there are a lot of them. But engines are now going on, and cars are going to line up by the red light at the bottom of the hill here.
Do you think there'll be lots of micro-analysis of the order in which the team principal has fist bumped the two McLaren drivers? It feels like we're at that stage of this title battle where everything is coming under microscopic analysis into this pursuit of who's favoured and in which order.
What I will say is that Andrea Stella is a classy guy, and just as an example, you know, Scott and I were at an off-the-record briefing with Zach Brown earlier, the CEO of McLaren Racing, and Stella, which unlike many team principals, he stopped by the table on his way out from one meeting towards the engineering office, I presume, just to say hi to everybody. just a really nice touch, because he's just a really nice guy who's done a absolutely fantastic job turning McLaren around into, the dominant team in Formula One from a very dark place not very long ago at all.
No, not at all. Of course, in Singapore, clinching the Constructors' title did McLaren to become 10-time champions in Formula One, putting them second on the all-time list. But we now have cars heading out onto the track, and they are in a hurry as well, because this is a sprint weekend. So just the one practice session, just the 1 hour. And for those who wish to do a sync-up, it's coming your way now. It's 59 minutes and 28, 27, 26, 25 seconds remain of free practice one. Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, first out on circuit. Max Verstappen, Scott, still very much a man that is mathematically in contention for the title, and it is also Max Verstappen.
It is, and I think that's why there are some similarities to 12 months ago in terms of there being a driver who is mathematically in contention but very much needs to pull themselves a lot closer to be more of a serious title threat. And the circumstances are slightly different, because this year we have two drivers in contention ahead of them, that being the two McLaren drivers in this instance. But unlike 12 months ago, when it was Lando Norris trying to play catch-up against Verstappen with the car advantage in the final stages of the season, I never really felt confident that Norris would be able to do it. It always felt like a hypothetical. I'm not saying that means that Verstappen's definitely going to be in this by the last couple of rounds, but something about Verstappen, in my opinion, instills a little bit more belief that he could drag himself into contention.
Well, Verstappen's one of those Formula 1 drivers who's a force of nature, a bit like Fernando Alonso, for example. They're just unstoppable. There's just something about them that just drives them relentlessly forward, and he's a very difficult man to divert from a path. And it's to do with the sheer scale of his talent and the sheer force of his will. And one of the interesting aspects going into this weekend is that McLaren have had a slightly sticky patch by their terms over the last few races. They've not won for 4 races. Verstappen's won 2 of those races and finished second in the other. Close the gap a little bit. Of course, you've got Piastri and Norris taking points off each other, which is another added factor, which wasn't the case last year, really, certainly for Verstappen, in terms of Norris chasing him down. And if he can keep that momentum up, then he very much could be in the game when it comes to Abu Dhabi at the end of the season. I'm not saying he will be, but if anyone's going to be, it's him.
He's reduced the gap, as Max Verstappen, to Piastri, who leads the championship by 41 points in the last 3 weekends. Just to bring up to speed with how the Drivers' Championship looks, Piastri leads with 336 points, 22 ahead of Lando Norris. Then it's a further 41 to Max Verstappen, who sits in third. All the way down to Charles Leclerc in fifth. Still technically in title contention, although I felt a bit sorry for Charles Leclerc. There was a graphic, I think, that came out in the build-up on social media, sort of looking at him as still in championship contention. A lot of the comments were a bit taken by surprise by that. It's not exactly been a year to remember for Ferrari.
I think nobody would be more surprised by that than Charles Leclerc himself. He's been quite down, hasn't he, Scott, in the last few races about where things are going generally at Ferrari at the moment.
He has. I think some of my colleagues might have been slightly responsible for those numbers emerging, so good job there. I think actually yesterday I felt like Leclerc was on a little bit of damage control after what he said after Singapore and that vibe he's given off the last few events. Charles is one of, if not the most emotional drivers on the grid, and not in a bad way, not implying that at all, but just it's not a case of, he just does it over the radio. Like, by the time he speaks to TV broadcasters, radio, written media, whoever, like in the half an hour or so after a session at qualifying, but especially a race, the emotion still pours out of him, and he cannot hide the frustration, and nor should he, with where he is and where Ferrari is at the moment.
Yeah, I don't really see it as emotional. I see it more as just truthful. He is a very direct person who is more than happy to tell you what's going on in his head. Whether if he's made a mistake, he'll tell you he's made a mistake. If he's done a good lap, he'll tell you he's done a good lap. And I really respect that in him, and it makes him a very compelling person to deal with, and particularly to interview. He's one of my favourite drivers to interview because of that characteristic.
Charles Leclerc, happy birthday as well, belated now. He turned 28 this week, did the Monegasque, and sits fifth in the championship, although Ferrari slumped to third in the Constructors' title over the last couple of races, and Red Bull are only 8 points behind them with a one-man team, really, in Max Verstappen scoring points. So, I mean, it really could go from bad to worse for Ferrari if Max Verstappen can haul them in with a gap of 8 points. It's easily doable.
Look, I think you talk to the team, they know they're having a bad season.
Yeah.
They don't even use the word bad, they use a worse word than that, right? They get it. They're the fourth fastest car, that's what they are. So, and they're only not fourth in the Constructors' Championship because Red Bull have only got one driver, effectively, as you say. So I think, of course, they'd be a bit disappointed if they slipped to fourth, but they would. I think they wouldn't be. They were not exactly going to be downcast about it. It'd just be a reflection of reality. They know the situation.
Yeah, it doesn't change what they face, and they will. It's the cliche that they will be the first people disappointed in it. But when you mention that about the belated happy birthday to Leclerc, that speaks to, I think, the heart of the frustration that he has, or the reality that he faces within his situation, and really shines a light on where he's at. You know, Leclerc's got plenty of time in F1 terms, as it's already been mentioned already, but Fernando Alonso has proven you can still be very, very, very good deep into an F1 career.
Well, he can be anyway. We don't have anybody else at the moment.
True. But Leclerc is entering what would typically be your peak years as a driver, the time when he would have expected already to have at least a championship challenge under his belt, if not a title or two, and he's going into a run of seasons where those title opportunities he would expect to arise. If what's happening with Ferrari translates into the start of the next rule cycle, Charles has already warned that could then mean a few difficult years trying to catch up, and then you're looking at getting to the end of the decade without potentially even having a title fight, let alone a championship, and by then he's going to be in his early 30s, and you know, who knows what other opportunities will await him.
Yeah, reportedly he's got contract to the end of 2029, I think it is. But you have to say, having been challenging for the Constructors' title last year, to then have slipped down, yes, it's a reflection of reality and they're well aware of that, but it puts even more pressure than there already is on 2026. The reset for everybody, as we discussed in depth, but it's even more pressure for a team that, if they're not winning, they're losing no matter what.
Yeah, I don't think his contract's that long.
No?
Actually, no, I think it's a bit less than that. But,
and I'm sure there's probably a few get-out clauses along the way that we don't quite know about. Times coming on the leaderboard at the moment, and talking of Ferrari, it's Lewis Hamilton who is fastest in these early stages, a 1:36.666, just 7 or nearly 8 tenths ahead of Liam Lawson. Then it's Sainz, Norris and Hadjar, the top 5, as Piastri goes up to second. Fernando Alonso, though, just coming around the final corner. Let's see where this puts him. With his first lap on the board on the hard tyre, slots the Aston Martin up into 7th. Let's head down back to Jenny in the pit lane.
And I am at Aston Martin and Fernando Alonso's side of the garage, number 14, emblazoned on the green sidewalls. And I had to say, Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll do something that other teams don't really do. They go and do a prep lap, and they went out on the medium tyre, did a couple of laps, and then came back, switched onto the hard tyre, which everyone else in the field started on, and then they're back out on track. But remember, this is just one FP1 session today, then it goes into quali for the sprint. So a lot of data needs to be combed over for this one session. They need to do long runs, short runs, measure the length of the pit lane, pit stops. All of these things have to happen before they go into sprint quali, ideally. So there's a lot of things on the list to tick off today.
It's interesting that, as Jenny says, everybody's out on the hard tyre because they've only got 2 sets of the hard tyre for the entire weekend. And it's interesting particularly today because there's a tyre offset this weekend. There's a gap in the compounds between the hard, then there's a sort of 2 steps to the medium and then the soft. So what they're doing here is they're establishing, they all think it's probably still going to be a one-stop race, even though the idea behind this sort of gap in the compounds is to try and make it not a one-stop race. But what they're doing here is discovering whether the hard is going to be a good tyre in the race in 2 days' time, because you would expect that the sort of default one-stop strategy generally in Formula 1 is the medium and the hard. And this is just them establishing whether that is viable or whether they might have to veer towards a medium and a soft, which is also a possible one-stop strategy.
Yeah, they're sort of we've seen this, haven't we, Jenny? I think they tried to do it in Spa, but it kind of got ruined by the bad weather. But it's another example of Pirelli. You know, they're trying to experiment to see if we can get a bit of greater choice in strategy when it comes to the races.
Yeah, they'd love to have 2 stops at every race at least, and it's just not playing out that way, no matter what they try and do, like increasing the speed limit from 60k to 80. That was in the hope that they could do more strategy and more difference in the starting times, but it doesn't work out that way. And just on that hard tyre, Pirelli are giving a very close eye. The hard tyre has never raced around here on an F1 circuit and on an F1 car, so they have no data. The teams have no data, and as Andrew said, that's why they're out there now.
Bottas 2 pushing. Bottas now on the nuclear 8.
Hey mate, stop with Bottas, mate. There's no Bottas on track.
Sorry.
It's very confusing.
Sorry, apologies.
That was Isaac Hadjar and his engineer. Bottas very much not on the track, not in a race seat this year. He will be next year, though, of course, being part of the Cadillac Formula One team. But clearly a bit of miscommunication there going on with Hadjar's race engineer to the driver.
Begs the question, was he referring to a Mercedes or a Sauber? It's like, I don't know.
I'm just trying to see where Hadjar is on the radio. Bortoletto is the car behind him.
Maybe that's it.
Maybe a former Sauber driver, of course.
And the B.
And the B, the ball and the bots.
Yeah.
And we're just seeing Valtteri Bottas now very much in the garage. Turns to look at camera, and I think he heard all of that as well and finds it quite amusing. So we'll see him back next year, lining up with Sergio Perez for that Cadillac Formula One team. 48 minutes and 47 seconds to go. Norris now fastest, 0.04 of a second clear of Carlos Sainz. And it's Verstappen, Hamilton and Albon the top 5, Tsunoda, Lawson, Russell, Leclerc and Stroll the top 10, Hulkenberg, Ocon, Piastri, Hadjar and Alonso the top 15, with Behrman, Gasly, Antonelli, Colapinto and Bortoletto 20th and last. Everybody out on the circuit.
So over the first 10 minutes or so of the session, with everybody running on the hards, you had the inevitable big gaps between lap times, even at the sharp end. But just now, starting to see the usual suspects emerge at the front. So there is less than a tenth between the top 3. Norris is up there, Verstappen, Hamilton. Haven't seen it from Piastri just yet. But just going back to Andrew's point about the teams figuring out this hard tyre, trying to get a reference on the baseline, I'm really curious to see what the track evolution is, as I think we're going to see a replay of Hadjar catching some traffic.
Yeah, Hadjar then having to run wide out through turn 19.
Traffic, what a joke.
He had Franco Colapinto in the Alpine in front of him, and you will get your lap time deleted if you run over the white line there with all 4 wheels. Max Verstappen, just seeing a slow motion replay of the number 1 Red Bull, kicking up the dust as well offline. It's also the track being resurfaced in parts as well, from just before turn 3 all the way to turn 7. So that sort of high-speed Maggots and Beckett's inspired section. So that could play a part in how we see the track evolving throughout the course of the weekend.
Well, it should make the track even quicker through those quick corners. Normally, when they resurface the track, that speeds things up. Also, Austin's notorious for bumps, so they'll have been trying to smooth out some of the bumps. It's something to do with the land that the circuit's been laid on. I think it's a floodplain, and that means that even when you make a perfectly smooth circuit, it doesn't stay smooth for long because it all settles awkwardly.
You could see when we saw a shot of Lewis Hamilton on a push lap coming into the hairpin at the end of that long back straight, how much the car was bumping and moving around in the braking zone. And actually Andrea Stella at McLaren referenced this in Singapore, I think, when looking ahead at these final few races, what's going to suit McLaren, what could suit Red Bull. And this track's really interesting because on the Red Bull side, Laurent Mekies, the team principal there, says that it's got a lot of the famous mid-speed corners that the McLaren's so strong on. But the McLaren side, Stella's argument that these short duration corners with bumpy braking zones should be something that suits Red Bull more than McLaren. So I'm really curious to see how that battle shakes out.
Also, the Red Bull is really good in quick corners, and of course that first section through the S's is all quick corners basically from 3 to 7, I think it is, before they slightly slow down to the medium speed corners through 8 and 9 and over the little crest there down towards the hairpin onto the long back straight. And then you've got that Fiddly Stadium section, of course, Scott, which is more slow speed corners, some of them short duration, some of them long. So that's what I was saying at the beginning of the broadcast, it really has got a bit of everything, and it's why the drivers Love it so much. Actually, I'm a bit gutted because I did get offered a hot lap yesterday, and
I can't believe you've turned that
down.
down.
It down because I was too busy, and I've regretted it ever since, Harry.
I was in exactly the same position. It might have been the same hot lap. I wonder who got offered it first.
Was it Williams?
It was.
Yeah.
Oh, that would have been good content, guys. Come on, think
Should we
of the
check our
content.
messages? See who got the first message.
When you get two journalists together in the same room. George Russell is the sound you're hearing right now. The man who has a freshly signed contract in his back pocket. We were waiting a while for this to be confirmed as he goes fastest of anybody in the middle sector, and finally they put pen to paper, and along with Kimi Antonelli they will continue with Mercedes through into 2026. Brief interlude on that. Who got offered first?
We'll show our hands.
Okay.
My message was 11:09. When was yours?
Oh, I think you got it first then, because I didn't get us until after Carlos's session, which would have been about 11:50.
That's right, because I turned it down and then I got a response from Williams at 11:14. So
Yeah,
sorry, Scott.
That's okay.
Benson takes the win on that occasion. Mitchell Marm in second. Russell crosses the line and puts that Mercedes up into second, the 10th, and a little bit away from Verstappen. Verstappen, Russell, Tsunoda, Norris and Sainz, the top five. But Scott, let's talk about George Russell. I mean, we kind of take it as written that it was going to happen, this contract extension, but I suppose the key thing that we all wanted to know wasn't exactly given away, and it was how long he had committed to Mercedes and vice versa.
Yeah, it was very much restricted to being a 2026 announcement of who will be the drivers next year. George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. Didn't shock me, shock you, Andrew?
What was bizarre about it was that they only said it was into 2026 in the press release, but then when you started to question them, how long's the contract, and of course they don't tell you, they called it a multi-year contract. Well, like, slightly mixed messages there, guys, especially given that I heard 2 weeks ago in Singapore from a pretty good source that one of the hold-ups in the contract negotiations was that George Russell was trying to make sure he had some freedom in case Mercedes were not competitive next year. So I'm suspecting, and I think Scott suspects the same, that when they say multi-year contract, what they mean is it's 1 year plus some options for some more years.
We both had a bit of a nibble with George yesterday, didn't we? For what flexibility do you have?
He wasn't playing, was he?
You gave it a go. I came in I tried a slightly different tack. He tried to put it more on us, just making speculation that wasn't there.
Oh, just seeing Hadjar running wide once more in the Racing Bulls through that fast middle section through turn 5. His teammate Liam Lawson coming to bother at turn 11 as well. Didn't want to turn the car in and getting out of the way actually of his teammate as well. So the two Racing Bulls putting in a hard shift. Kimi Antonelli's out there as well, along with George Russell. Jenny?
I also had a little nibble at George and tried to get it out of him of how long this contract was. Laura Winter went first because she works for F1 TV. So she asked him quite openly, look, how long is your contract? And he very smartly and cleverly, because that's George Russell all over, said 52 pages. And it was just such a smart answer. He'd obviously thought about it, but yeah, clever man. Just throwing that out there as one of the, I think it is actually George Russell has come into the pit lane and cast off his tyres and is just getting rolled back into his garage. They're just waiting at Aston Martin as well. But I don't really understand it. These teams want to be as transparent as they can, but then they don't give us all the information, and surely not giving us that information just leads to the questions being relentless of how long is the contract. Everyone wants to know the answer to that question, and actually it takes the gloss of the achievement of not only winning last time out in Singapore, but also what he's been able to do with that car this year. And I just think, I don't know, I question that logic.
Well, look, Jenny, it's all about us not asking them questions, because what happens is the information eventually always comes out, and all the people who need to know, like all the other team bosses and all the driver managers and all the other drivers, they all know, and that's how the information comes out, because we all talk to each other, them and us, and they might tell you the information. But they don't like, obviously from Mercedes' point of view, if they tell us that Russell's on a 1+2, for example, which means 1 year plus 2 years in options, or 1+1, all that's going to happen is from the beginning of next year, people like me and Scott are just going to constantly ask, so are you going to sign him again, or are you going to sign Max Verstappen? And which we're going to ask anyway, but that's what it's about.
It just certainly keeps us quiet for a little bit, doesn't it? And kind of confirms that stability that they want going into 2026.
But the thing is, it doesn't keep us quiet, because people like me and Mark and Mark Hughes, Scott's colleague, and Scott himself, we all wrote articles saying Max Verstappen, basically.
Well, yeah, but you would, wouldn't you?
Well, it's those are the annoying questions that George was referencing yesterday. He's said it a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's not in his interest now to rock the boat. Over the last few months, it has been,
And he has been.
yes.
Yeah.
So he's been having some fun with it because that was in his interest to try and push certain things. Question. Just sowing the seeds for a bit of questioning over how much control does he have over his destiny and things like that.
I don't have a lot of power in this relationship, as a phrase he came up with in Hungary, for example, when he was a bit, obviously at that point we knew now that at that point that Verstappen was definitely going to stay at Red Bull, because he came out and said it in Hungary after weeks and months of speculation about his future, which was all bound up with the dramas that were going on internally at Red Bull, which have all gone very quiet now that Christian Horner's been sacked. He was using that to his advantage in the media, but of course the minute he doesn't want us prying anymore, he clams up and basically gives us a 10-minute press conference where he says nothing at all.
And isn't that Formula One in a nutshell sometimes? A big lock-up from Franco Colapinto a few moments ago in the Alpine, and we've got a red flag out on track as well. Lance Stroll's just had a little run off an excursion too, and did something fall off of that Aston Martin, and they just want to red flag the session to try and retrieve that. He carried on making his way around the final corner, but the Aston Martin certainly pushing hard, so everybody then will have to come back to the pits. The clock continues to count down, 39 minutes and 2:10 seconds left on the clock, and it is hot in Austin. A heat hazard declared once again for this weekend as well, so we expect to see the cooling vests in action. We're getting a little bit closer look at just a bit of carbon fibre, is it, that's sort of fallen off onto the edge of the circuit? Looks like it.
Yeah, it's a strip of carbon fibre that fell off, I don't know which bit. Here's some radio from Leclerc.
So there's debris on the curb. Turn 19, stay away from the curb.
Yeah, that's Brian Boxey just confirming what we were talking about. It's a bit of carbon fibre, a sort of long, thin piece that's come off Stroll's Aston Martin. By the look of it, we saw it flying up from his car as he came through turn 19. And it's, I'm not sure it needs a red flag, really. They could have just yellow flagged that area and sent someone out to get it. But anyway, of course, it might not be. That's why the red flag is, but it does rather look like it.
I also don't think really drivers can be trusted to behave properly under yellow flags sometimes.
And that is a prime area where cars are going to run wide, isn't it?
Well, with that radio message, stay off the curb, that's one of those places where that's easier said than done. So because that is, while that's on the runoff past the curb, that's basically the racing line coming out there. But we saw Max Verstappen, didn't we, pushing the limits coming out of that corner a few minutes ago.
Yeah. Everyone back to the pits then. We're just waiting for Charles Leclerc and I think Colapinto to make their way into the pit lane, so hopefully it won't be soon before we get this session back underway. Crucial time being lost. The only practice session we get, and that is kind of why I love sprint races, because the jeopardy is so much higher. But the pit lane suddenly a little bit busier, Jenny.
I like it when it gets busy down here. You have to keep you on your toes, but I'm just waiting outside Charles Leclerc's garage at Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton's already been rolled back. Ferrari just have some high vis on the rear wing of Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari, so that'll be interesting to see what they've tweaked, what they're changing, and what we're trying to assess. Lewis is saying every time I speak to him, not happy with the car. They're trying to develop, they're keeping on looking at options and ways to make this car better. They seem to do well in FP1, and then any point on from FP1 it just kind of falls away in a disappointing way. So it's a bit frustrating, and speaking to Lewis and Charles after Singapore, they were upset with the way it's going, as you would expect. But all the teams have gone out, they've all done between 8, 9 or 10 laps so far, and this, I'm guessing, Andrew, this is right when they didn't need an interruption to gather information for long runs.
Well, it's a bit annoying, isn't it, because the clock keeps counting down in practice if they have a red flag, which is why I was questioning it earlier. They could have maybe done a virtual safety car or something, but anyway, it gives the teams a chance to come in and make some adjustments if they want to. And we've just seen confirmation, by the way, on the TV pictures that it definitely was a piece of debris from Stroll's car. He banged over the curb at turn 19 twice, actually, once out over the curb into the runoff area, and then once again a big bang coming back onto the track from the runoff area. And they don't seem to be doing anything to that car, though. We've just seen some shots in the Aston Martin garage. Just interestingly, by the way, I just can make this point. I was talking to somebody the other day about Fernando Alonso, the Stroll's teammate, and he was saying, he was talking about his competitiveness and his determination. He's always got to find something to have a target, even if he's having a really bad year with a really uncompetitive car. And this person who knows Alonso well said he believes that the only thing in Alonso's mind at the moment is to get 24-0 on Stroll at the end of the season.
Wow, just to have something. Oh, he's well and truly on course for that.
And he did get out-qualified in the sprint qualifying in China, but that's the only time. He's certainly not been beaten in a Grand Prix qualifying all year. And I as soon as he said it, I thought, yeah, he's absolutely right. And he was basing it on 2018, which was his last year in F1 before he took a couple of years away, when he did exactly the same to Stoffel Vandoorne, 18-0 by the end of the year.
Small crumbs, really, isn't it, for Fernando Alonso?
But it says a lot for his character.
It does, it does. And I think, we'll see a lot from his character next year and how that Aston Martin pans out in the new regulation era. Stroll, coincidentally, 12 Q1 eliminations, the most of any driver this season, just one ahead of Nico Hülkenberg, who hasn't actually made it into Q3 at all this year, which is a bit odd for Hülkenberg. He's usually pretty quick over a lap, but has lost a bit of confidence with his qualifying over the course of this year. But with the red flag still out, we'll get this session going actually now at 12:55 local time. So Yuki Tsunoda comes out into the pit lane, does a burnout and makes his way down towards pit exit. A man very much still under pressure for that second Red Bull seat, but as he heads out, so let's check in quickly with Jenny down at Aston.
Yeah, fitted it up to Aston Martin, and that sounds like a large Yuki Tsunoda fan base, doesn't it? Number 18 car of Lance Stroll in front of me. They're just working on, I'm guessing they've put on the spare front wing. They always carry a couple of spares for each car, and they do tend to just do a practice of changing that front wing anyway, but I think they've been forced to do that. They're just doing some suspension tweaks as well to the front of the car to make him a bit happier, so hopefully when he goes back out he won't bounce quite as much.
Let's hope. Stroll still in the pits, as you say, and Alonso where is Alonso? He's down 11th at the moment on his out lap as we get this session back underway. 33 minutes and 9 seconds remain of this session. Now, we talked about it a lot in our preview show on the Checkered Flag podcast, but if you haven't listened to it, I just want to kind of almost do a little bit of a follow-up with you two. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri battling it out for the championship, but I just want to know a little bit more about consequences, repercussions, and the ambiguity of what they might be.
So yeah, just background, Norris banged into Piastri at the first corner, or third corner technically, but the first chicane at Singapore last time out. That got him the position ahead of Piastri. Piastri was upset about it. He got on the radio and said words to the effect of, "Are we okay with Lando just barging me out of the way?" Because their framework, as they call it within McLaren, of guidelines as to how they should race together, rule number 1 is don't hit each other, or don't crash into each other, really. Norris was claiming yesterday it wasn't a crash. I think it was a small crash, even if it didn't have any consequences for him.
It's just a technicality.
Actually, it did break his front wing, didn't it? Anyway, they've reviewed it internally since then, and they've made it clear this weekend, and I actually salute McLaren for this level of transparency, that there will be consequences for Norris from that incident. What they haven't said is what those consequences are, although I have learned today that they are sporting in some way. And I think we're going to have to keep an eye out to see the sorts of things it could be. I'm guessing, and it's only a guess, that there might be something to do with ordering qualifying, or a tow maybe.
Some sort of priority.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Not a race track position in a Grand Prix. Nothing as severe as that, because they think it's a relatively minor incident, which it was, even though Norris made a mistake by hitting Verstappen and then bouncing into Piastri. But so I think we just have to keep an eye on McLaren and how they run things this weekend, as to how they do that. Now, Damon Hill is in the commentary box with us, and he's just he's not going to talk yet, not for this session, but he's just showed me a headline with Martin Brundle, the Sky commentator, saying that he thinks this McLaren approach is doomed to fail. I'm not so sure, but it is certainly unique the way they've got two leading drivers to compete without falling out for a championship so far. We'll see whether they can manage it. Scott, over to you.
They're trying to do something that's never been done before. I quite admire the intent. I don't always agree with the execution. I'm not sure it'll work. I'm maybe not quite as negative as Martin is about the end game, but yeah, they're trying to do something very, very difficult, which is admirable in its own way.
Just seeing a replay of Carlos Sainz making his way into the pit lane. Let's hear from him.
Box, do not push, box.
Being told
I'm looking at a potential issue with the gearbox, I'll let you know.
Okay, told not to push as coming into the pit lane. Potential gearbox issue for Carlos Sainz. He's made it back into the pits, and I think he's out of the car. Jenny.
Yes, I haven't quite made it down.
Run, Jenny, run!
I've got a can of water in my hand. If I run,
drop the water, Jen. Drop it.
I can't litter in the pit lane. That's rude, isn't it? I made it as far as Racing Bulls. There's the next one. One of the Ferraris is going out. I'm filling for time as I make my way. Carlos Sainz's garage is the first garage. There's a bevy of media waiting around to take pictures and photos and videos, and it's up on its stands. As you correctly said, I thought I was going to see him trundle down the pit lane, but this isn't great because Williams had an issue in Singapore as well. They're taking the floor off, which to me always says possibly the end of a session for a driver. So they had an issue in FP1 in Singapore with Alexander Albon's car bursting in flames, I think. So this is just another issue for Williams, and missing out FP1, not great when you've got a weekend ahead of you that is a sprint weekend. And yeah, there's loads, I think there's water or liquid in the floor, which it's not meant to be, so it looks to me like some sort of leak.
Scott, there was a James Vowles press conference this morning, which I couldn't go to because there's only one of me and I can't be in three places at once, and there was an Apple press conference at the same time.
Three Bensons is a terrifying thought.
Did he say anything of any consequence?
I also couldn't attend it. So
but your colleague Ed Straw presumably did.
I think Ed was caught in traffic getting across from something else that happened.
So don't look at the race for any Williams news, everybody.
I can quickly check. If you guys fill for time, I can quickly check to see if I have a transcript.
We can fill. It's what we're made for. 28 minutes and 15 seconds remain of this second. Hamilton fastest at the moment, ahead of Verstappen, Russell, Tsunoda and Norris, the top five, with Sainz confined to the pit lane now, ahead of Lawson in 7th, Leclerc, Hulkenberg and Ben in the top 10.
On that subject, while we're filling, it's been a very, very busy morning, by the way, news-wise. Earlier on, in the UK in the afternoon, but here in Austin in the morning, Formula One announced that Apple would take over the TV rights for the US market from next year in a 5-year deal, which I think is massive news to Formula One. And then Tim Mayer has withdrawn from the FIA presidential election campaign, or rather I should say he's given into reality because a quirk of the rules has meant that no one else can stand against Mohammed Ben Sulayem. You can work out the rights and wrongs of that for yourself if you read the stories on the BBC website over the last few days. And what else has happened this morning? We had that previously mentioned off the record briefing with Zach Brown, a James Vowles press conference. And the producer, Paddy, who left his passport at Houston Airport on Wednesday like an idiot, has got it back again. Or not, maybe he's not got it back again, but he knows that they found it and he's going to get it back again.
He's got a pep in his step, as producer Paddy. He's been so miserable since he landed, and now he knows where his passport is. Happy days.
And he's so pleased. He's just told me he's going to buy us all around tonight.
Hey!
I think we're going to a famous burger joint in Austin.
The perils of travelling around when you're following the F1 circuits. The loss of the passport, the misplace of the passport, creates a heart-dropping moment like no other. I've had 2 near misses in that sense, but never so much as that. So I'm relieved he's got it back. I know the fear.
And he's been barking on about it since he landed. Esteban Ocon is the sound you're hearing on a replay, trundling off the circuit and just not able to get it stopped.
The brake, it stayed at 100% all the way.
Wow.
So we're checking that.
You could see on the replay there, very, very strange. He didn't seem to be travelling at speed. I think that might have been either an outlap or a slow lap afterwards. Braking normally, probably quite low pressure, I would imagine, given the speed it looked like he was doing into turn 11, wasn't it? The hairpin, and then just sudden locking, and just strange. And we saw Max Verstappen on a push lap at that corner a few minutes before have a small lock up and run deep. Now that Ocon example was a very strange one. I was going to observe when we saw the Max thing. These cars, this generation of F1 cars specifically, never looks worse, more unwieldy than a lock-up at slow speed, because it just loses all possibility of deceleration and turning. They look horrible to drive in that specific moment. They're really on a knife edge when you're trying to scrub the speed off into a corner like that one, which is really, really difficult. And the fact that it leads on to that long back straight means it's critical over one lap in qualifying, and also is critical in the race, whether you're defending or overtaking.
Getting a bit of a swan song really now for this generation of cars. There's just 6 races and 3 sprints left to roll for the final quarter of the season to be completed before we rock up in Abu Dhabi for the season finale. Carlos Sainz, suspected gearbox problems. He's been confined to the pit lane for the last few minutes. Jenny, any more updates?
Yes, it's currently in the garage, kind of eating/drinking, so I'm guessing it's some sort of soup from a thermos cup, which, I mean, I walk around with all the time, but I've never eaten it with a spoon, so goodness knows what's in there. I'm not going to ask him. But the car is up and it stands. The rear end is being taken off, so I'm expecting them to replace that gearbox with a like-for-like. I don't think they'll have to put a new one in. I haven't got the records with me at the minute, but I'm guessing they'll just switch it up and not take any sort of penalty. But there will be no more running for Carlos in FP1. Good news is they say he will be back for sprint quali later on this afternoon. Nice gap between FP1 and sprint quali, isn't there? So plenty of time.
Clarification, Jenny, please. Did you just say you'd never eaten soup with a spoon?
No, I've never eaten from my thermal cup, which you know I take everywhere with me, and like Paddy's passport, I have left it behind before, and Paddy had to reunite me with my thermal cup. But no, I have never eaten something from my thermal cup. I just use it for green tea, but it looks like it's some sort of noodle soup. I'm going to have to ask him now, aren't I?
Well, we've seen at previous races a lot of them are eating ice or some sort of blend of ice and electrolytes. My favourite moment was when we were trying to work out what it was, and I was convinced I knew exactly what it was because Mercedes had told me, but Sam Bird, who was in the co-commentary box, was also convinced it was rice, and I was very happily proven right on that occasion.
Yeah, if anyone wonders why we're blathering, it's because nothing's happened on the track in terms of changing the order. I would say on the point of the cars coming to the end of these regulations, it's something that Formula One and the FIA have been quite quiet about, but I think it's basically a sort of tacit admission of the failure of these regulations, to pick up on Scott's point about his Antonelli's radio.
That was my bet from Albon, by the way. Copy.
More traffic paradise at turn 19 and 20, that was a reference to. Anyway, back to the cars. They've abandoned these rules completely for 2026 and gone back to flat bottoms and stepped floors, and which was the previous regulations from basically 1983 to 2022 in various iterations, but fundamentally that aerodynamic concept. These ground effect cars will be no more from next year.
Well, it's interesting because some team members push back a little bit on the suggestion that it's a complete rollback and believe that there's elements, it's not completely flat bottom, there'll be an element of it. But it's a pretty big departure, isn't it, from what we have now, aligned with totally different engines and the engines and the changes around that. And there's obviously been a lot of reporting around regrets, shall we say, about the composition of engine and car. But the new formula on the car side very much had to follow the lead of what we're doing with the engines, and then kind of like mangling a car and a set of aerodynamics and then a set of sporting regulations and everything around that to accommodate those engines. So yeah, we're going from the end of this where it's all nice and compact and quite fun at the front, generally speaking, and then we're throwing it all in the bin for next year.
But they didn't have to abandon ground effect to do that, because actually a Venturi car is technically, and this is not just me saying this, here's Hamilton's radio.
Throttle pedal's really slipping for some reason.
He's having some problems with his throttle pedal. Adrian Newey told me that a Venturi car, as these are, is more aerodynamically efficient by its nature than a step bottom car. So he wanted, this was a conversation a couple of years ago, he would have wanted ground effect cars to stay. So they didn't have to abandon ground effect for this new era of cars, but they have chosen to do so despite that, despite them being more efficient. And efficiency was one of the problems they had with these cars, because they had to, these people might, I don't know what people know who are listening, but they having movable aerodynamics of both front and rear wings to try and get the requisite balance of energy recovery from these new engines, which are going to be 50% more or less total power provided by the electrical part of the engine, as opposed to about 20 or so percent now.
We're going to have a new team next year in the form of Cadillac, and they've been quite present over the course of this weekend so far. I think they even gave a bit of a press conference, didn't they, about some of their technical updates and how they're getting on.
Again, I didn't go to that either, Harry, I'm afraid.
Andrew, you said you've been working this weekend. Shocking.
Other work.
But Scott Mitchell did go?
I did not.
Oh, okay. Guys.
And I'm much more across what was said in that than I am in the James Vowles session this morning. So, yes, it was Pat Simmons and Eric Warren, so Cadillac and General Motors representatives, two people very, very high up the food chain there, covered quite a lot of ground actually, and the two individuals we haven't really heard from, certainly not in that level of detail so far, and they've got very grand plans and hopes and ambitions for the project. They will be quite a way short of them next year when they join the grid. They are not under any illusions that they'll be at the back. It's a question of progress and can they get to the front when they build their own engine. How competitive will that be? And you're looking towards the very end of the decade before you start to see that team more in kind of the image they expect. It's really a question of how far behind they are next year and what the roadmap is to improve from there.
And is that purely because of the scale of the project that they're taking on? Because if you think back to the last new team that came in, it was Haas, right? And they had a very different model as to how they approached Formula 1. They kind of basically bought as many parts as they could from Ferrari and took their engine and was able to slot everything in and around that. So is it just purely down to the fact Cadillac are literally building from zero upwards that we're all expecting them to be at the back?
Just that and timescale.
Okay.
There was a very convoluted admission process. Basically, F1 said no initially. They had to fight that. There was all sorts of things that got very complicated with a Department of Justice investigation in the US, and so F1 back down, and so they got admitted. I can't remember exactly when it was. It was probably just not much more than a year ago. So they've had very little time to put a team together and know that they were going to build a car. And of course the rules aerodynamically weren't actually officially released until January the 2nd this year for next year. So putting a team together and designing a new car to new rules that didn't exist until a few months ago, it's a massive project, even if they've got lots of people on that team who are ex-Formula 1 people from other teams in the past. And also the site, they've got, I had a tour, I can't remember whether Scott was on it or not, I don't think he was, I think his colleague Ed was. We had a tour of the Silverstone site that Cadillac are using at the moment, and it's like 6 different buildings on the Silverstone Innovation Park near the Aston Martin building. But the contrast with the Aston Martin building is quite stark in the sense that that's one new state-of-the-art, purpose-built factory all under one roof. Whereas we walked around these bunch of buildings all over the place.
But to be fair, Aston Martin only had that building. They've only just moved in practically.
That's true, yeah. But past Hi-Tech's building, for example, the Formula 2 team, they're sort of next door to one of the Aston Martin factory, one of the Cadillac factories. So you can get a sense of the difficulty that they've got putting that project together.
And it's not just disparate in terms of the UK base. The UK base is just one part of it. They've got the elements in the US. Lewis Hamilton is running off-road. This is only a replay, not happening right now. Tricky hairpin catching him out in the Ferrari. But yeah, so Cadillac will have, they've got facilities in the US. They have the team base there, but they've got the other GM centres that they'll be using. And this is one thing that's emerged this weekend that Pat Simmons talked about, is that they still see no reason why the team cannot be wholly based in the US, and strongly suggesting that the long-term plan is that Silverstone will be the satellite base for now while they're getting up to speed, but the long-term plan does seem to be fully in the US in the future. And when people in F1 cast a little bit of doubt over the practicality of that and whether or not that can really work, that's not about dismissing or disparaging the competency of people working and living in the US. That's about the practicalities of time zones, logistics and everything, and the fact that just in reality everyone's successful and everyone is based primarily in the UK, including the other American team we have on the grid.
Yeah, I mean, it's because a lot of the transport that's done by Formula One for the cars and everything is done holistically as a sport from London, basically, because the vast majority of the teams are based in the home counties region near London. Of course, Ferrari are not like that, and Sauber are not like that, but
Sauber are opening an engineering hub, aren't they, in that part of the world?
A small satellite base in Bicester, yeah, exactly. It's Bicester, isn't it, Scott? Yes, they are, and Ferrari haven't, of course, but then Ferrari haven't been very successful, have they, for the last few years?
It does open up those questions, doesn't it? But I also wonder, surely, is there an advantage to being split? Because you technically, and I think I heard Graham Loudon talk about this on I think, a podcast with Tom Clarkson, about how, well, then you're basically on all the time. You've got more than 24 hours in a day, because you can have the full day operating in the UK, and then as the UK shift is finishing, the American side of the firm can suddenly light up.
I'm not sure why that's an advantage, because the things that create an advantage in terms of wind tunnel time and CFD and so on, they're all controlled by the FIA, and every team has a finite amount of those, and that is decided. It's not the same, because it's on a reverse sliding scale in relation to success in the Constructors' Championship the previous year, or the previous 6-month period, I should say, really. So I don't really buy that argument. And he says that logistics has joined up enough around the world now, Loudon that is, for it to work for them. Let's see.
Well, I'll tell you what, Jenny actually, I think, spoke to Graham Loudon today. You'll hear it across the 5 Live network throughout the weekend. Jenny, did you pick up anything interesting? Can you tease us a bit with what Loudon had to say?
He's such a fascinating man. He's been in the sport for such a long time. And I think that a few people were kind of thinking, well, why has he got this job? It's a massive American company, and they're going to Graham Loudon, who has a very broad northern accent and wouldn't maybe be everyone's first choice, but he has the advantage, I suppose, of setting up a team. He helped set up Virgin when they came in, and he was around Manor before that. So he has a good set of experience behind him, and of doing this, of setting up a team from grassroots, from nothing, basically. And they've done a really good job of recruiting. It picked up a lot of people as a fallout over the last couple of years. And they took a bit of a gamble as well of saying, you know what, well, bring people in, even though we don't have a race entry yet. We are confident that will happen at some point. So let's recruit. So I think they had something like 450 people before they even had an entry. And some of those are really good, talented people. So they believe in themselves, and they are confident that they can at some point produce a really good car. But they're shadowing the whole of this event this weekend in a program that they're calling Race Ready. So even down to the driver's time, they simulate everything back at base. And as far as I said jokingly, oh, even this interview, and he said yes. So we've got this interview simulated back at base, because no one will be able to get hold of me during this period. When the driver's doing something, they won't be able to get in contact with the drivers. So it's really important they simulate everything as is here to try and get themselves up to speed. So their thinking is, when it turns into Australia and they're ready for their first race, they will be race ready as much as they can be. And I think it's a really fascinating process. I've not heard it before.
Oh, it certainly is, but I think I'm right in saying that Bottas, when he lines up on the grid in Australia, and after his first qualifying in Cadillac, he'll have a grid penalty to serve, won't he, from crashing into Magnussen in Abu Dhabi last year.
It'll probably be academic, because he'll probably be at the back of the grid anyway. And meanwhile, I hope Jenny's not offended the entire population of Tyneside and suggesting they couldn't be Formula 1 team bosses. But yeah, I mean, look, I'm joking, obviously. But so Graham Loudon used to be involved with the Manor and Marussia team in the sort of mid part of the 2010s, and actually, I mean, maybe Cadillac won't be at the back. Maybe they'll surprise us all, because it's definitely it's an expectation in it's an exercise in expectation management very much at the moment. But Scott's shaking his head. I agree with him. I think they are going to be at the back, and I think the thing that people a lot of times, big companies, especially from America, they think, oh, it'll be all right. We'll be fine. We're General Motors. Of course, we can succeed in Formula One. But almost without exception, they generally underestimate the scale of the competitiveness in Formula One and the level that is involved in this sport, and just how finely honed all these teams are. It's a whole other it's a whole other sphere from any other motorsport category. A completely different challenge. For example, Cadillac compete in sports cars at the moment at Le Mans. This is exponentially more difficult than Le Mans. And we've got another company coming in next year in Audi, who, of course, have had incredible success in the World Endurance Championship. And they've also employed a load of people who have been successful in Formula 1 before. They've got Mattia Binotto running their team. They too, I think, are going to find it difficult because, as I say, the level is just so high in Formula 1.
I wouldn't disagree with any of that. I suppose maybe just a comparison to when Graham Ladden was first in Formula 1, bringing in that Manor Marussia team. They were made all sorts of promises, weren't they, those 3 new teams, about a cost cap coming in that never really materialised, and they were never in the fight. Whereas now, the cost cap that was introduced a few years ago, I think you can say, well, that has worked, and that has encouraged the basis of Formula 1 to thrive more than it did back in the early 2010s?
I agree, yeah. And the circumstances of Cadillac's entry are difficult in their own right. It's more like Haas coming in, but still in the same way not like Haas. They're going to be somewhere between what... They're not going to be Haas, because Haas obviously did such a good job coming in and scoring points. But they're going to be somewhere between Haas and those new teams. But while this has been a very good conversation about Cadillac, and slightly more relevant filling than broth-based inquiries earlier on, we do have some on-track stuff to get into.
I know, I feel like we've really gone down a rabbit hole there with Cadillac, but there is so much to discuss on the US market and Formula 1 right now. Less than 9.5 minutes remaining of this session. It has now started to get a little bit more interesting after a quiet moment. We're seeing some other tyres out there. Max Verstappen is the sound you're hearing. He's out there on the soft tyre along with Piastri, Tsunoda. Alonso's gone out on the soft, so too Albon, Bortoleto, Stroll, Gasly and Colapinto. A couple of others trying out the medium tyre. That's Hadjar, Antonelli, Leclerc, Lawson, Hamilton and George Russell. So we are getting a little look then at what simulations they can do on these other tyres. A reminder, Pirelli have introduced an extra step this weekend between the compounds, an extra step between the hard and then the medium and the soft. That's just to try and encourage a little bit more strategic options, possibly, maybe not trying to be the ultimate route of just having a one-stop using the hard tyre, trying to slow that strategy down enough that it could introduce the soft tyre into play when it comes to race day on Sunday.
So we have a new benchmark time. It's George Russell on the mediums, a 1:34.675, but I suspect these soft runners are about to eclipse that. Max Verstappen started that lap into turn 1 with the front left absolutely threatening to lock up, but just not quite. I love watching Max in FP1. He and Alonso are just the two drivers who get to the limit the quickest. They're so much fun to see on the limit.
They really are. He missed his apex a little bit as a consequence of that, didn't he? Here's Leclerc's radio.
What happened? Can I shift or not? The 7th wasn't going in.
We'll come back to you.
There's oil smell.
Ooh, maybe some issues on board Charles Leclerc's Ferrari. He is back in the pit lane at the moment, so the Ferrari team will have a look at that. Max Verstappen continues coming into the final sector now, fastest of anybody through the middle sector, swinging that Red Bull through a triple right-hander of 16, 17 and 18. Then it's a quick flick out through 19. Don't run all four wheels outside the white line. You will be pinged for track limits. The same through the final corner, a slight elevation change before you put your foot flat to the floor, and he goes to the top of the times, a 1:33.648 on the soft, 0.8 ahead of Yuki Tsunoda in the second Red Bull.
I think Alonso is about to go faster though.
Ooh, but there's traffic coming for Alonso. Will it get out of the way? Yes, just about.
He's just going to get to the final corner in time as well. Let's see what he can do. But yeah, unexpectedly prophetic timing to say that those were the two drivers to enjoy the most in FP1. He does go 9,000ths of a second faster than Verstappen.
Fernando Alonso to the top as the soft tyre running continues. Tsunoda's down to fourth now. Oscar Piastri fastest in the middle sector. Hamilton out there on the medium tyre. He's just popped himself up into third spot, 0.3 away from Alonso's soft tyre. Let's see what the current championship leader has round the final corner. Oscar Piastri, who heads Lando Norris by 22 points. Fastest in the middle sector, third fastest by the end of the lap. 0.2 adrift of Alonso.
I think he might have gone fractionally deep into the final corner, maybe just taken a bit too much speed, because it didn't look like he improved his final couple of mini sectors on that lap. And 0.2 adrift, it's a continuation of the fact that it's just not quite coming together for them. Andrew mentioned earlier the the slightly sticky patch that McLaren are going through. Norris is starting a lap on the soft tyres now. Maybe he can go a bit quicker, but yeah, I wouldn't mind Alonso versus Verstappen for sprint quali pole later on today.
That would be rather nice, wouldn't it?
Can't see Fernando up there later, I'm afraid. Aston Martin's flattered to deceive, hasn't it, a few times in practice this year. I will say, though, he drove an outstanding race in Singapore, but I'll just park that there because you'll take the mickey if I go any further.
No, we missed it all anyway, didn't we? That's all I'll say on that.
I'm happy to pick that up. I think he did drive outstandingly in Singapore. He actually drove 2 outstanding races in Singapore. The first one and then the second one, when he had to come back and offset the fact that the first one, which was going really well, got undermined. But yeah, Alonso really thrives on sprint weekends because he and actually Aston Martin have got a lot better at this year. I was speaking to Andy Cow, the team principal and CEO, yesterday about this. Feels that they've really got on top of the car, certainly compared to the very start of the season and the end of last year. As a combination, driver and team, and especially driver, they're really good at hitting the ground running, but that does mean they do tend to fall back, as you can only fight gravity for so long.
It's because he's so good at getting to the limit straight away, basically, like Verstappen, and he will tell you this himself, whether he might be exaggerating his own ability, of course. He's been known to do that from time to time, but he feels that what happens is he gets to wherever the limit is straight away, and it takes most of the weekend for everyone else to catch him up. That's his view, effectively.
Lando Norris, fastest to the top of the times, a 1:33.294, although I did think he ran out all 4 wheels wide at one point, but it is just practice. But mighty lap still 0.3 clear. Is Charles Leclerc coming into the braking zone of 11, and now back in the pit lane. We heard him on the radio reporting maybe some gearbox issues, smelt a bit of oil as well.
You could hear on that replay it wouldn't upshift, so I think that was a replay of the moment he described over the radio where he couldn't get it into 7th gear just before they got into the hairpin.
And we just seen him being wheeled back into the garage, shaking his head, looking a bit despondent, as we were describing his general demeanour at the moment. Another difficult day for Charles Leclerc so far here in Austin.
Another good showing of the emotional honesty.
Yes, exactly.
Is the power okay or what?
Mode 4 was 2/10 of lap time. I'm waiting for feedback, but it's not okay.
Yeah, that's a joke.
Speaking of emotional honesty.
Yeah, you beat me to it. Hadjar not happy with the power output of his racing bulls, but she actually had an issue with 2 in Singapore last time out. Despite that issue, he really gave Fernando Alonso a hard time with a bit of fighting in that midfield. Cue some fantastic Alonso radio as well.
What was that line he said?
We did a whole feature on it afterwards. Hero of the race. We've scrapped driver of the day now, and we're doing hero of the race from here on out.
And then an extreme amount of swearing on the last lap about Lewis Hamilton cutting the corners when he was struggling with a brake issue. Which then Hamilton got penalised for, and Alonso got the position from him as a consequence.
Yes, I had to do a rehearsed reading of that on the review podcast afterwards. So.
And then we had the press conference yesterday. Alonso was he said, not for the first time, they used the team radio badly on Formula 1 TV, and they only take snippets of it, and it's all out of context. All I will say is, if we didn't get Fernando Alonso's team radio on the TV broadcast, it'd be all the poorer for it, wouldn't it?
I couldn't agree more. Kimi Antonelli is the sound you're hearing right now. His future also confirmed for next year with Mercedes. Will continue through into his 2nd year as a Formula 1 driver, having had an up and down rookie season so far. But the last couple of races, though, Antonelli going well. He's qualified in the top 4 and finished in the top 5 in the last 2 Grand Prix. Currently 20th and last, but we'll see what he's got. He should shoot up the times on this medium tyre that Antonelli is on. Russell she slid down to 13th now, also on the medium tyre. But Antonelli, at least, I think I read on the race, Scott, as he runs out wide, coming through 19. I think I read on the race that he was worried at one point about his future.
Well, he admitted to having a little bit of doubt. I don't think he was ever truly worried about his imminent future, but when he was going through that elongated, difficult spell in the middle of the season, he admitted to there being a little bit of doubt, and he said he is a bit more relaxed now that it is all sorted. He's been very honest, I think, this season about the tricky moments. He's accepted as well. He's not hiding behind the fact that he didn't adapt well to the difficulties of this car earlier in the year, because not being able to adapt can be a sign, or well, certainly is a sign of a driver's limitation, and it could be a sign that that's not necessarily in Antonelli's armoury in the way that it is for the very best drivers. That could come, he could show that more in a different set of circumstances in the future. So maybe he does have it, but he's admitted that he didn't do a good enough job with it. And at times, Mercedes, team boss Toto Wolff, has got increasingly honest that there were points where it was underwhelming. So I think that's more what he was getting at.
Well, that future is confirmed now for Antonelli, as we're just seeing a replay of Yuki Tsunoda just about saving that Red Bull from an aeroplane crash, coming through 3, 4 and 5, all crossed up, and having to take to the exit road and cut the corner and rejoin. I think that would have raised his heart rate slightly.
That was massive. That was a fast hand Tsunoda. That was, I mean, that made my heart go a little bit, so that could be code brown for Yuki. In
thank God there's only 20 seconds left of the session for Tsunoda, who has got some time to find as well. He's down in 12th, 1.2 seconds off Lando Norris's fastest time. I tell you what though, there's half a second, just as I say that, goes down to 0.2 of a second. Still though a gap between our championship protagonists.
Okay, so we are staying out for the checkered flag match.
Max Verstappen wasn't happy with his lap, but the clock has counted down to 0. The checkered flag is out, and they want him to do some practice starts on the grid at the end of this one.
I'm just going to wait and see if he actually does. He is, because we have seen this from Max before. I think I can definitely remember at least one occasion where he's been so unhappy that he just wants to complete the session and come in, even though the request is to go down to do those practice starts. Obviously, with there being sprint qualifying and then the sprint race, it's key to get it back now. So it's being a good team player there is Max, despite his frustrations.
Clock has counted down to 0. Nico Hulkenberg still on a quick lap though. It's looked pretty fast so far, but it is only FP1. Expecting Evolution to really ramp up, and of course this is the one and only practice session we will get, as Hulkenberg on the soft tyre has gone fastest in the middle sector. The German driver, who hasn't scored a point since that fantastic breakthrough podium for the 39-year-old German in Silverstone, trying to start his weekend off in a rather confident way. Flicks through the left-hander of turn 19. Let's see where he puts this fluoro green Sauber. One final corner to roll for the German driver to the line. And will Nico Hulkenberg top the session? No, he won't, but he'll finish second, just over 2.5 tenths adrift of Lando Norris.
I'd take that first 2 rows for the sprint. Hulkenberg trying to send it on Norris into turn 1 tomorrow.
Well, that turn 1 is a habit of it, isn't it? You're more advantaged if you're the second place driver, really, going up towards the incline of turn 1, because the apex suddenly closes on you and you have that inside line naturally, depending of course on how good your start is. But that is the checkered flag out. Lando Norris quickest to the end of that session, just under 3 tenths. Clear of Hulkenberg, Piastri third, Alonso and Verstappen the top 5. Albon was 6th for Williams ahead of George Russell. Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari 8th, but with a slippery throttle pedal. Hadjar 9th, Behrman rounds out the top 10 with Esteban Ocon in 11th, Bortoleto 12th ahead of Yuki Tsunoda, who nearly had a massive moment in the closing stages of this one. Stroll 14th ahead of Liam Lawson. The 2 Alpines, Colapinto ahead of Gasly in 16th and 17th. Antonelli only 18th in the end on that one. Sainz 19th, but with suspected gearbox problems, and Charles Leclerc also with issues in that session, down in 20th and last. So not how they would have wanted to start their United States Grand Prix weekend, as the cars make their way back onto the grid for the practice starts. Let's check into the pit lane. Jenny.
Yeah, as you were saying, Carlos Sainz with that gearbox issue. They're working heavily on that car down at Williams. He will be ready for sprint qualifying, say the team. And just to answer that question, it was ice that he was having with a spoon. So I was wrong. I can't remember who said it, but well done whoever said it was ice. You
Thank you very much, Jenny.
Right.
I'll take all the credit on that one. Just seeing the practice starts from Lando Norris there towards the apex of turn 1.
Did you see the line he took into turn 1? That was very much now whether that's attack or defence, but that was very much a dive for the inside line and brake late.
I really want to know. I just can't wait for race day. I think this is set up so nicely, and honestly, we chat all about how McLaren drivers want to go racing and how the team want them to go racing throughout the remainder of this season. You do just have to think, well, these are 2 young Formula 1 drivers. You could almost put the full stop there at the end of the sentence, but this is a chance to go for their first ever Formula One world title ahead of a season next year where everyone hits the big reset button and nothing is for certain. You've surely got to give it your all for the final 6 rounds.
Absolutely. Nothing is guaranteed next season or beyond. They might have all the confidence in the world that what they have at the moment, and this is at the heart of why McLaren and the drivers buy into the idea of trying to do things the right way, because they don't want to bring the team down from within with infighting, driving into each other and so on. But at the same time, you do have to think short term as well.
Well, we have still got a lot more to come your way, but that is it for FP1 and the one and only practice session which Lando Norris has topped ahead of Nico Hülkenberg and Oscar Piastri. Thanks to Jenny down in the pit lane, Andrew and Scott Mitchell-Marm from the race joining us for this one in the commentary box. It now ramps up. We go qualifying for the sprint race. That'll be on Sports Extra from 10:55 this evening ahead of the green light starting at 11 o'clock. Who will be on sprint pole and the first sprint points up for grabs tomorrow morning? This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.